All right. Hello, everyone. Today, my guest is Davyd Farrell, a quantum plant healer and alchemist from UK. So, following our two podcasts that we done together, I was invited to David's podcast. I thought it would be fair to invite him back to mine, and talk about his path and his work with plant medicine. And he has an interesting path to share. So, hello, David.
Hi, good morning. Buenos dias, brother. How are you?
Buenos dias. Very good, very good. Thank you for coming. So, maybe we can start from your path. Introduce yourself, who you are, and share with audience how a guy from UK ends up in Mexico, following shamanic path, similar to a guy from Ukraine, doing the same thing in the Andes. So please, wherever you want to start from.
Well, thank you, bro, for the introduction. And yes, thank you for inviting me to your show. We've done a couple of Huachuma sessions on my YouTube channel and Wisdom Hub, which have been fun and many people have liked. And one of the reasons that we wanted to do it was because of our similar paths, right? We're both very long way from home and with very interesting journeys, both born in the same year. So very similar astrology too. So I think that probably explains quite a bit. But where to start? Well, for me, I'll come to the quantum plant healer in a little while because that does require some explanation. But I'd like to start with my wake-up call in 2010. I'm actually going through what's known in astrology as a Jupiter return. So it's a 12-year cycle. And 12 years ago, I was in Egypt, actually for the spring equinox, as part of a big spiritual group that were touring the Egyptian sites and looking at all of the pyramids. And the lady that was organizing it, lady called Patricia Corey, she's written a bunch of books about Egyptology and the Anunnaki and a whole bunch of stuff that I was interested in, very ancient history. And she was organizing a tour to go to Egypt for spring equinox 2010. And she had arranged special access into many of the sites after hours. And so I found myself in the Great Pyramid in Egypt on the spring equinox of 2010. With this group with private access for 6 hours from midnight till 6 o'clock in the morning. If you can imagine how blessed that is. We spent 2 hours up in the king's chamber with the sarcophagus doing toning and singing and poof, man, back in 2010 I was still a guy who liked his beer and his football, really. Didn't think I had any sensitivity, didn't realize I was an empath or even that I was psychic or any of these things, really. Just a guy who liked his history and was beginning to open up. And as part of that trip, I actually got to do a past life regression with one of the ladies who was on the trip in the group, a lovely lady from back home called Lorna. And she took me through a past life regression that was completely off planet, much to my surprise. It was nothing to do with Earth. It was all to do with off planet stuff. And so I completely freaked out. Decided I needed to drink a bit more beer at the bar and process all of it. And that began really a series of many things that ended up taking myself and my then wife to India to live for a while. And then from India to, up into Tushita in the Himalayas in northern India, where His Holiness the Dalai Lama is living, and spent 6 months there studying Tibetan Buddhism. Then decided to go and spend 2 years in a Tibetan Buddhist semi-monastic center in Tuscany. That was up until about 2013. And then somewhere in the middle of all of that, I met Mother Ayahuasca, Grandfather Peyote, and a whole bunch of other plants. And that was really the beginning back then of my remembrance of being a plant person. And so, yeah, it was really in a teepee somewhere outside of Glastonbury, working with the Mother Vine, that I had this conversation that went something like this. It's like, well, look, brother, that event that you've been thinking about organizing in your head, which I had been, something to do with permaculture and sustainable living and plants. She said, it really needs to be about the intelligence of plants. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, but I'm having a conversation with a plant right now. And she's like, exactly. And you can have conversations with many plants. So I was like, okay, wow, that's kind of intriguing. And then she also told me at that point, I was still living in Italy. She said, you have to come home now, brother, and organize this event. And this event then turned into the event that was called Plant Consciousness. So that's where it began, brother. That's how the plants called me. And it was really a process of soul remembrance, deep meditation for several years, very, very deep in the Tibetan. What was really surprising for me was the first 2 years of being with that medicine, as all of my teachings were in a form of Tibetan Buddhism. Nothing from the jungle, no anacondas, no jaguars, nothing. Lots and lots of mountains and Tibetan philosophy. And I remember asking the Mother Vine at the time, I was like, well, how come I'm getting all of this Tibetan stuff? And she said, well, look, because that's what you've just learned. That's the modality that you're most familiar with. So I'm going to show you how those teachings can now manifest from your heart into your life. So it was really interesting for me to have that experience with a plant that's, you know, seemingly from the Amazon, but then to teach me about Tibetan Buddhism. So, you know, my plant journey really has always had underneath it the sense of the Buddhist practice. I never took refuge. I didn't want to take the vow, but I took many of the teachings and transmissions from many lamas. And I have to say that 12 years on, almost, that the teachings are still coming through. That's the beauty of when you take a transmission from a lama or from a plant, is that it keeps unfolding. And I can say the same about my Amazonian teacher, Kuri Kindi, that I'm sure we'll be talking about in a little bit too. But that's how I got onto the plant path, bro. That's a little introduction there.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. Thanks for sharing. It's interesting what you just said, that you know, you're drinking ayahuasca and you know, thinking about Buddhist philosophy. You know, it's very similar to my journey with the medicine, which is still ongoing to this day. You know, I came to the medicine with a baggage of Eastern philosophies. That was my path before I met plant medicine, you know, since ever, you know, reading Zen Buddhism and Sufism and all that stuff, Indian stuff, you know, and Chinese philosophy. So I was seeking for wisdom in the East, you know. And then when I came to the medicine, everything it's just like when I came to Huachuma, everything started making sense, you know, but everything was about that, you know. For me, it wasn't ever about, you know, anacondas and jaguars, you know. Not it is today. That's the thing. And, you know, it's, for me, that's the framework I put my medicine into. So it seems like it's very similar for you too. It's like we're talking to plants, we're, you know, combining traditions, but it's very much, for me, the path is that it's Eastern spirituality. It remains that, you know. So we can talk about that later, but I just wanted to kind of continue with the storyline. So do you remember what was the plant that called you most, or just, you know, many plants, or just a general call from nature?
It's a good question, actually, brother. I mean, I have to say that even though I haven't been with the ayahuasca medicine now for quite some time, I was with it very deeply for many years at the beginning of my journey. And, you know, she also really gave me the inspiration to organize the plant consciousness event that was the biggest event of its kind in Europe for 5 years. Many hundreds of people would come every year, and we'd bring different speakers connected to all types of plants, from permaculture to indigenous wisdom to shamans, etc., trying to give an overview of the fact that plants have this intelligence. And, you know, I'd say more than anything else, ayahuasca was the plant that really opened me up to that, and also opened me up to the astral planes more, made me aware of all of the doorways, demons that I hadn't dealt with from my life. I spent 6 months a little bit later in Ecuador training with my teacher, who's a tabaquero and an ayahuasquero. That was really pretty brutal, but that was a strong initiation that I'll come to a bit later on. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but the first plants that came to me, well, you know, it's very timely because I'm just about to organize an online Artemisia immersion. But the first plant that really came to teach me was Artemisia vulgaris, otherwise known as mugwort, part of the wormwood family. And that actually happened around the same time that the ayahuasca started to open me up. I loved that medicine, but at the same time, I always felt the call to work with my own native medicines, particularly the sacred fungi, the liberty cap mushroom, which grew a lot in the area I lived in Wales. And so I began my own personal journey with that medicine. I would go out and collect it, I would dry it, I would work with it, I would do ceremonies with it, sometimes with my partner, sometimes by myself, sometimes with friends. And the first couple of years were tough. I was running scared from a lot of my stuff, and I never knew quite what was going to happen when I took the medicine. Sometimes it would be really beautiful, other times it would be really kind of scary and full on. And I then began to understand why the importance of the Buddhist teachings was still coming through so strongly from ayahuasca, because she was really wanting to hold the foundation of my practice. And she understood, and this is the beautiful thing, as you know, with these strong plants like ayahuasca and Huachuma, is that they read us. They work with us. They don't try to enforce their way of doing things, their will or their environment onto us. From what I've experienced, they worked with me, and they realized that I had these other foundations and inputs from the Eastern traditions of Buddhism and Taoism. And that gave me a basis on which to work. And so then the other plants started to come. And for some reason, I'm going to share this little story actually, because it's really beautiful. We were out taking a nature walk, a guided nature walk in our local town in Wales at the time, a place called Abergavenny. And we had a lovely lady called Liz Knight who took us on a tour around. And for some reason, we were just finishing the tour, and I got this kind of intuition about mugwort, just popped into my head really strongly. So it's like, oh, you're about to meet mugwort. And I'm like, what? This literally came into my awareness. And as that thought came, the woman who was guiding said, I just want to take you through this gate into the meadow here to see if there's a plant that I want to show you. And she said, oh, yes, here she is, mugwort. And I was just like, what? So that was my introduction to mugwort, Lady Mugwort, Artemisia vulgaris. And that began a journey which continues to this day. I was absolutely captivated immediately by this plant. It's very powerful energy. I then started to investigate it, research it, found out that it's been working with humans for many thousands of years, and that it's a very powerful plant, very powerful witch plant that teaches us how to deal with many things, including protecting ourselves, but also realigning ourselves and clearing ourselves of parasitic energies. Very, very shamanic plant that is used all over the world, or variations thereof. So that then opened the door to working with mugwort, which was really the main plant for a couple of years. And then I decided around the same time that I wanted to take a more detailed initiation or course. So I went to work with Carol Guyot in Ireland for 2 years, who wrote a beautiful book called Sacred Plant Initiations. And she really fused Celtic shamanism with traditional herbalism and plant spirit work. So I studied with her for 2 years, and around or at the same time, we also started working with a wonderful lady called Pam Montgomery. And, you know, we were talking about lineages before in our last Huachuma sessions, Sergey, and, you know, it's always important for me to acknowledge my human teachers too, because they all had a profound effect on my journey. And so I studied with Pam for 5 years. At the same time, I studied with Carol, and I also studied with a man called Michael Dunning, the U shaman, who taught me the U mysteries. So I had 3 or 4 teachers all around the same time, and another teacher, Dr. Patrick Mumanaway, who taught me geomancy. And because I was organizing the plant consciousness event and many retreats, I was very blessed, really. I got to select all of the teachers that I wanted to work with whilst organizing retreats and events for other people to benefit. I would like to say that organizing all of those events kept me poor, much to everybody's surprise. Organizing big events does not make you a lot of money at all, not in Britain anyway. But what I can say is that I was spiritually a millionaire. I felt spiritually rich because of all of these wonderful teachers, wonderful experiences that I was getting over the course of, I guess, 5 or 6 years, really, from about 2012 onwards. And then at the end of that, I got to work with a wonderful, wonderful teacher, a wizard, really, from the Isle of Man, a man called David Leasley. And he taught me quantum magic. He taught me how to work properly in the quantum space, and how to combine all of the plant spirit work that I've been doing for years with Pam and Carol, organizing plant dietas, plant retreats. And of course, I had 6 months by that point in Ecuador too, with my teacher in the jungle, working with ayahuasca, guayusa, and tobacco. So really, that was the kind of culmination point, and that's when I started doing my healing work about 4 or 5 years ago. Was working with all of the plants, but at the intelligence, the quantum space, the 5D and 4D space. And what I realized was that through working particularly with sacred fungi, Huachuma, and ayahuasca, and also Santa Maria, the cannabis plant, that I was able to access the 4th and 5th dimension increasingly more, with more clarity. And once I started understanding that when I made a flower essence, which is the vibrational medicine of a plant, if I took that during a mushroom ceremony with the intention to invite the spirit of that other plant into my space, the spirit would come very, very profoundly. And that's how I started my work. That's how I became a plant spirit healer. And I now feel that that has moved or evolved into the quantum plant healing space, which really to say is working in the quantum space, the fifth dimensional consciousness with other beings, particularly in my case, plant beings, but not exclusively. I also work with many other spirits too from the land. So that's kind of a very, very small version of a very, very long story, but hopefully that gives some idea.
Okay, thank you very much. So before we continue, yes, I want to definitely confirm that plant teachers certainly speak to us through the language that we understand. That's why Ayahuasca talked through Buddhism, and to me, talked to the language that I understood, which was very similar, and then through this, we build our own relationship with the plants, and then we kind of enter their kingdom, but we're carrying with us the foundation that we kind of that we established during our search, spiritual search. So it's all totally makes sense, and then I concur with that in my personal experience. So how about we talk about the plant intelligence more, because it's a subject of basically of all my books too. I read about Huachuma mostly, but of course peyote, ayahuasca, they are there too. They are part of me too. So I'm very much familiar with it, and that's a big part of my message, connecting to nature and to plant, to the intelligence of sacred plants, which is there. So maybe we can talk about this and see how we approach this. I think in my second book, The Mescaline Confession, I think I speak about which is wholly dedicated to Huachuma. I approach this from scientific and from shamanic perspective. Scientific is the research, is basically what is known to science about mescaline, which very little, to be completely honest, And then I share approach from, shamanic approach, and working with the medicine for over a decade. So I just wanted to bring people both views, so people can see the conscious themselves and kind of, find their own answers within this information. So let's talk about plant intelligence. If you want, we can talk about specific plants that you work with, and maybe we start from general. Like, how did you first discover that? Like, what was your first experience when you just start talking to the plants and hearing back from the plants? So
good question, brother. It's one that people ask me a lot, and I want to share that when I say I have conversations with plants, it's been an evolving journey, and I had to learn the language of the plants at first, which often would talk more frequently through synchronicities or subtleties or different things like this. And I had to learn how to say the frequencies. Each plant is like a human. It has its own frequency, or what I would call an energetic anchor. And so this was some of the work that I did with my teachers, Pam and Carol, right back at the beginning of this. And Pam was very good at taking us outside when we were doing plant retreats. So this is one of the ways that we would do it. And I'll talk you through the first retreat we did, which was with hawthorn, which is a heart medicine very similar to Huachuma. In many ways, we could say that even though hawthorn is not psychedelic or an entheogen, it has very, very similar qualities in the way that it works with the heart. So we organized this retreat for 4 days. And as part of the retreat, we would make a special elixir that would consist of all types of hawthorn medicine: hawthorn berry tincture, hawthorn flower tincture, hawthorn essence, distilled hawthorn flower water. What else would we put in there? Also dried medicine sometimes. And we would make this medicine, a huge amount of it, for all of the people on the retreat, a bit like we would call it an elixir. And then for the 4 days, we would fast. We would be in a retreat center, normally down in Devon, actually. And we would fast. And then we would drink a measure, of the medicine 9 times across the weekend. And so the idea is you're clearing out the system, very, very similar to how they do it in South America, but adapted to our environment and our plants. And then Pam would take us through a series of different shamanic exercises, a lot of journey work, breath work, a labyrinth work, artistic, creative work, offerings, blessings, many, many different things over the weekend. And so the idea is that when you're drinking this medicine in, that the medicine is filling your entire field, flooding, in fact, your field with her energy and medicine. And so then things start to happen in the dream space. Maybe you are meditating and some realizations start to come, or you start to see correspondences. I have to be honest, when I did that retreat many, many years ago, I'm not sure that I really got what was going on. It was new and I was excited to spend time with hawthorn. But compared to where I am now with that plant or that tree and the work in general, it was new. And it took me several years actually to really get a better understanding of how to talk with plants, which is where the mushrooms come in. The mushrooms really were my glue. I would go into the mushroom space and start working with flower essences or tinctures with the intention to connect with the plant that I wanted to work with. And so what would happen quite frequently was, and this is how it happened with mugwort first of all, was a ceremony dedicated to mugwort on a full moon, I think it was, to meet the spirit of mugwort. And I'd say about an hour into the ceremony, suddenly this intelligence, this being appeared in my inner space, in my third eye, and she introduced herself as a witch, as mugwort. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'd read about this, shamanic accounts from South America, but here was a plant spirit visiting me in my energetic astral space, communicating and starting to teach me about things. So that's how it happened. Now, the reason the Artemisias are good to work with and why I often like to work with them first with new students is because they're very visceral plants. Mugwort is used, Chinese mugwort or Chinese moxa is used with acupuncture to push chi energy around the body. And my Weber Weird co-host Emily Watt is a moxibustionist, and we'll be talking more about that again soon. But because these plants have the energy of being able to push chi all around our meridians, they have this energy of forcefulness. And so it's very easy for many people to experience an interaction with a plant like mugwort because he's also very good for dreaming. So he's known as a dreaming plant. So we would often do dream incubation exercises on mugwort retreats. And we had one lady once who came, I want to share this little story. And she was like, well, we can do these dream incubation exercises, but I haven't had a dream for like 20 years. And I'm like, okay, everybody dreams, you're just not remembering it. And she's like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm not having anything going on. Okay, let's see. So we had the daily routine of drinking the medicine and everything. And then we did a special dream exercise before sleep. And then the following morning, we did a dream share, in the first thing, in the circle. And this lady said, you're not going to believe this, but look how much I've written, pages and pages and pages of a series of dreams. And she said, I can't believe it. She said, I haven't had a dream for 20 years. And here I am with this plant. And I've just had this one long dream that was super clear. I met her, she looked like this. And she told me this, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And it was just like, she said, I can't believe it. She said, I'm blown away. And then we went around the circle and more people started to say the same thing. Wow, actually, yeah, she came to visit me in my sleep too. And so what's interesting is when you're working in a group space like this, with 25, 30, sometimes 40 people on the retreat, and having these sharing spaces, is that you start to see that everybody is having similar, if not the same experiences with the plant. But each person is manifesting it slightly differently for themselves because of whatever pre-existing illnesses, traumas, etc. they've got, but also depending on their soul's journey. So some people have also worked with plants and trees before, and often I would like to see in the circle, how does the plant emerge out of each person? Because some people would immediately get the plant. Other people maybe who haven't worked with plants so much, either this lifetime or other lifetimes, it's a little more difficult. But it's like learning Spanish, so it just takes practice and you have to keep doing it. And since I had that first experience with mugwort, I've pretty much been dieting with plants ever since. A decade of plant diets, pretty much. So I learned the language of the plants from mugwort and other plants. And now when I work with plants like dandelion, it's like, wow, I'm working with a star being. My connection with the plants has gone much more multidimensional these days. So
what's going on with this dandelion?
Wow. Dandelion is a dude. I can tell you that he is one serious dude. He is a being, he's a star being from the Sirius system, very deeply connected to the feline beings, the Leo beings. They're very much part of the Sirius energy. And dandelion, of course, is Diontodilion, the lion's tooth. And, he really teaches us how to clean out the liver. But the liver, like all of the organs in Eastern medicine, they're all really in service to the emperor, which is the heart. And so dandelion wants you to be in your heart, but also he's a time lord. So he wants you to be really present in this moment. because there is only this moment. This moment I'm now talking to you, and this is the only thing that exists. Everything else is either something that already happened or something that is waiting to happen. And so what he teaches us is to be super present, so that we're here. And when we're here, we're in our heart. And when we're here and present, we start to see so many things around us happening. But if our minds are like 3 weeks in the future, or looking at what is going on in the illusion box in the Ukraine or in Taiwan or somewhere else, then we're not here, right? We're somewhere else. And Dandelion shows us that when we're somewhere else, we're using a lot of energy that really isn't being put to much use. Maybe we're getting stressed out watching the television, seeing what is happening in America or Britain or France or whatever. And we're not here in Mexico or Peru where we're present. And so, you know, Dandelion shows us that when we become present, we start to see how is our life flowing. I mean, he has many gifts, Sergey. I'm just giving you 2 or 3 of the top notes, but I've dieted with Dandelion 3 or 4 times now, so I'm quite friendly with him.
So how you diet the Dandelion? What that includes?
So good question. Where to start with this? So when I first used to do diets, I was very, very strict, and I would like maybe do 5 or 6 days, a bit like the retreats. I would really reduce the food down to very simple food, you know, rice and boiled vegetables, and I'd really empty out the system and go deep with the plants. But also part of the process for me would always be making a medicine. I learned how to make essences, or, you know, vibrational medicine with water and alcohol and the intention of the plant, like the batch flower essences, or, you know, the bush flower essences, or these kinds of more well-known ones. And then I realized that when I did that, I was giving myself the opportunity to have a direct conversation on a regular basis with the plant. So I would take the essence, I would make the essence myself, and I would take it every day. And I would also collect the medicine, maybe make a tincture, maybe dry it, make a tea. So over the course of 4 days, a week, 10 days, however long I chose to do it, I would do the same as a retreat and flood my system with the plant that I wanted to meet, and through the medicine. And I would always start the process with a mushroom ceremony, and I would finish the process with a mushroom ceremony. So very, very similar to how dietas are done in the jungle. A little bit more like a British flavor, because it's you know, Britain, and it's a bit more cold, and situations are a little difficult. I can't go and, you know, be in a hut somewhere in the mountains in Wales. It's not so easy, probably going to freeze to death. You know, so that's how I started doing it. And once I kind of got into the routine of that, I then realized that I was understanding the language, the general language of the plants more easily. And so these days, really, it's become a lot more simple for me, because I have done so many of these diets. I don't know, maybe 30, 40, 50 different plants, some of them repeatedly over and over again, like Mugwort. I've done diets every year. I've done parasite cleanses with wormwood, her cousin. And, you know, that's a sort of a detox process, but I switched it up, followed the Dr. Hilda Clark parasite protocol, but I added in my own essence, I added in my own tincture, and I added in my own tea. So for 3 weeks, I took a lot of wormwood medicine with the intention to clear out the actual parasites from my gut, but also to clear out the energetic parasites. And I had a very interesting experience once, because I would always do mushrooms during these experiences as well. And I did one in the middle of a parasite cleanse once with wormwood. And as soon as the medicine came on, I was like, ugh, like, what's going on? And I suddenly became aware that I was being fumigated by the plant. But because I was in the astral space, I could see everything happening. And so I said to her, I said, what on earth is going on? And she said, well, what did you expect? You're in the middle of a parasite cleanse, and I'm killing all of the parasites in your body, and you're seeing it in the astral space. So I was like, oh my gosh. She said, what do you want from me, man? You wanted to do the mushrooms. You wanted to see what's going on. Here you go. This is it. So I'm like, okay. She said, well, you know, I'm sorry it's not more pleasant, but you wanted to see. So this is very much wormwood energy, because she very much opens our third eye and allows us to see the truth. But the problem with this, as I discovered on my first wormwood diet, was that she completely removes the veil. And so suddenly you realize how many lies you're surrounded by, how many lies people tell to you, how many lies people tell to themselves. And being so scorpionic, I already had the gift of being psychic anyway, and seeing things other people wouldn't. So with wormwood, it went through the roof. It was quite uncomfortable, actually, for a couple of weeks, seeing the shadow of the world around me. These are shadow plants, the Artemisias. They help put light into the shadow and illuminate it. So yeah, couple of little stories there.
Interesting. Well, first of all, it's interesting that just like probably last week in the ceremony, I was telling this to one of our guests who just arrived here. I was explaining her basically that when you drink Huachuma, you're being fumigated like an insects, but in a good way. Your mind parasites are dying, and that's what's happening to you right now. It's like it will not harm you, but all the mind parasite will die. For them it's poison, what's for us it's medicine. So just when you were telling this, I just remember us talking. And then interesting that you mentioned scorpion energy into it. It just make me realize that actually after this near-death experience that I had in Mexico during my shamanic initiation with peyote, when I was stung by deadly scorpions, and my life changed since. I definitely I see that was the beginning. Actually, I had that before sometime throughout my life, like in the latent form, maybe it wasn't active, but after that experience, like it took some time, to unfold. But later it was kind of a psychic ability that I realized within myself that allowed me to see through people, and that's what I use in my work now. That's exactly how I read people and how it helped me to understand better person and understand their needs and their traumas and their pain, and to lead them towards solution, towards healing. It came from that, it just kind of resonated when you said that. I made that connection right there. It's like, yeah, that's right. It's like I moved to Peru after that, and it just like started to, to appear more and more. That's what I'm trying to say. Like seeing through lies, seeing the darkness, bringing people out of that. It's just becomes so easy for me somehow. It's like no brainer for me. It's like you just come spend some time with us and I'll walk you through, But that certainly has a connection with the scorpion energy that I engage in the land of Huichol Indians.
Well, look, thank you for sharing that, brother. I'm just going to add a couple of things, because being the star sign of Scorpio, with a lot of planets in Scorpio, a lot of my life has been about dealing with poisons, death and rebirth, psychic abilities. And I'm curious that your experience with a scorpion, which is also about poison, gave you a near-death experience, which is about life and death. But that's also enhanced your psychic abilities, which are often one of the qualities that Scorpio people have, is that we have the gift of the psychic abilities. But until you have that under control, it can be a little uncomfortable, because sometimes you don't know how to handle it. You're not sure about what are you seeing. As a medicine man, okay, it makes a lot more sense. But in the everyday life, as a 14, 15-year-old, even as a 22-year-old, it can be a little confusing to have these intuitions about people or situations and try to express them, and then realize that everyone around you is not having the same experience and they're not seeing the same things that you are. So in many ways,
and they call you crazy.
They call you crazy, or maybe something worse. But so I'm just reflecting. I think it's interesting, brother, that your journey also has the scorpion energy. And here in this house, in this orchard where I live with scorpions. I woke up one day about 3 weeks ago, and there was a baby scorpion on my pillow next to me, about 2 inches from my face, which was a little like, and then I found another one at the end of my bed a few days later. But for some reason, I don't have any fear around them, because they feel like family. And when I sit and watch a little scorpion, I see myself, because they like to hide. They're actually very passive animals. They only attack when they've been cornered.
Yeah.
And they only use the poison when they're really feeling incredibly threatened. And I think many Scorpios are the same.
But that the baby scorpions are actually more dangerous than adults. You know why?
Go on.
Because they don't know how to measure the amount of venom to give you.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's just how I feel. It's like the adult knows. It's like, okay, I just don't need to. It's just a little bit to protect myself. But the younger one, they don't know, so they just give you the full power just to make sure. So
you got the idea, right?
Yeah. And which ones do you have there where you live?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I mean, even the adults are only about that big. So adults
yellow?
and babies. Again?
Yellow,
No,
brown?
they're black. They look typically like black scorpions.
Okay.
Just very, very small. I'm glad, because I don't want one that big on my pillow next to me. That would be too much.
Scary.
That would be way too much.
These guys in Nayarit, they're deadly there. I don't know if yours are deadly too, but those guys are like lethal, you know.
Well, of course,
Hardcore.
I'm in the same area that probably, or close to where you came, because we're not that far from the Witch-Holy territory up in Guadalajara. It's only 3 hours away.
But are you neighbor with Nayarit? Or you have another state between?
It's a little distance. I'd say across to Nayarit is probably about 6 hours drive from here, which in Mexico is not far, right? But I wouldn't say like it's next door.
Maybe like 400 kilometers something.
See, something like that.
Okay. Well, you know, just, you know, scorpions, you have to respect them, you know. You see them, just like show them the way out, you know what I mean? Like take them nicely, put them in the mountains, like go live your life. Talk to the guy, you know, I'm not trying to hurt you, don't hurt me. You know, you kind of, you know, don't freak out, don't kill them, you know, but let them out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let them out.
I mean, you definitely don't want them in your bed, but sometimes, I mean, because they're everywhere here, actually, there's a lot of them in the orchard. And sometimes I lift up a plant pot and they're underneath there, or I lift up a mat. And I've even had a couple in my outside shower with me a few times. And to be honest, like I said, they don't bother me because I know they're not going to attack me unless I do something.
Yeah, no, they're not aggressive unless, you just step on them or just like, you know, kind of interfere. You know, what was interesting? I just made this connection. When I was writing my first book and I was sharing the story, you know, I made a connection that when I was 14 or 13, 14, we just moved to Israel like a year later, you know, I was like 12 and a half. And we were living in the north and in the hills, and we had scorpions there, you know. So me and my friend, we were collecting them in the nature. There was black scorpions. So we were having those plastic bags and you know, and we just were walking and look at this one, you know, taking them through their tails, putting in a it was like a chocolate, like a Nutella. It was like a Nutella plastic bag. So we took all the Nutella out and we cleaned it up, make a little hole, put the tape, and that's where they live. So I brought them home. They were living in my bedroom, man, for many months before my father knew about this. I didn't tell to anyone. So that was just my pets. And, you know, we were living there together. I was hunting for them every day. And like big, you know, what are these guys? Like crickets, like bigger ones. What you call them?
Locusts.
Yeah, something like that. Like those guys. So I was,
grasshoppers.
It was like I was hunting them, putting feeding the scorpions, seeing the scorpions kill it, eat it. I mean, for many months. And then my father came and was like, what the hell is that? Like, oh, this is just my friends here. You're like, what? Get it out of here. So we had a fight there. It's like, no, but it's all safe, you know. He's like, no, we can't have scorpions in the house. Get them out of here. So I took them out, let them out. It was like a whole ritual, man, letting them go. But the thing is, like, I was like 14, then I was 32 when it happened in Mexico. So I don't know what was like 18 years later. Interesting. That was 18 years later, and I was 18 hours paralyzed completely after the stun. That's just another connection, you know. But that's like, you know, the spirit of scorpions, they were with me like the whole time, you know, like actual in a physical dimension. So
fascinating, Brian. You know, I kind of think it's, you know, we haven't talked about this before. This is completely off the cuff, so I don't know so much of this stuff. And, you know, having studied scorpions too, I never had them in a jar in my bedroom. But isn't it interesting you had that intuition at that age, and then many years later, the scorpion is the instrument of your spiritual awakening.
Initiated me into the world of spirit.
Right, you know, and scorpion is a powerful medicine spirit. It carries that poison, but poison can also be used for healing, as we know, right?
Yeah, if you make through this. I mean, that's what shamanic initiation If you make through it, you're on your path to serve. If not, then, well, next time, you know.
Inshallah.
You know, So that's
So I guess we can say, if you ever find scorpions, don't do like some people would do and put your boot through them, because that's not nice.
No, don't do it at home. Do not do it at home. Do not bring scorpions to your house. Don't say like, hey, Sergey, I heard Sergey saying that in podcast. No. Don't do it, okay? Just respect them and avoid them, okay?
Please do allow Scorpios into your house, because they're often very nice people and often very generous and friendly. But
I had a few girlfriends that were Scorpio, in my life. So, well, they didn't go very well,
I need to have a look at. You did send me your astrology, and I need to have a look at it properly. So I'm sure you must have some strong placements in Scorpio to have had these experiences. But
yeah, check it out. I would like to hear it. But it's interesting that my the near-death experience in Mexico was also in November, which is a Scorpio month. It was November 15 or 13. I think it was 15 or something. Right. So it was just too much Scorpions, man.
Right.
But thanks to that, I can see through darkness now, and not just see, but help people to get out of there. It's just the whole thing makes sense now. 13 years later, 14 now.
Right, and even though we're talking about scorpions rather than plants, what I want to suggest is that this is how the plants and many other spirits communicate with us. When we sit and we look back like we're doing now, we see all of these links and connections and correspondences, and then we see that the spirit of Scorpion was working very strongly with you since you were young. Probably means you have some connection from maybe Egypt or the desert from a past life, or who knows. But
I don't know. But it's also interesting because it happened in the peyote ceremony. So everything was orchestrated by the spirit of peyote. It was hikuri, it's just this. It wasn't just an accident. The whole thing was, it looks like an accident. Of course, nobody sent Scorpion to kill me there, but the whole thing was just organized, orchestrated for this event to happen. So it was plant consciousness, which is in this case peyote consciousness, with Scorpion consciousness working together. It all sounds maybe crazy for people who really don't understand what we're talking about, and it's like, man, these guys are nuts, peyote talking, sending scorpions, to initiate Sergey into shamanic path in Mexico. That sounds like over the top, but that's the truth. That's what happened, So for me, it all makes sense now, but it's a lot of soul searching, a lot of understanding, trying to understand what happened, putting things together, feeling through it. They kind of bring you to the place of better understanding of how magic works,
right? Which
is the whole other subject, which also including plant intelligence, because that's exactly where science loses it. And I was writing in my books, I speak about this all the time. It's like science loses it exactly there. It's like whenever you even hint to anything beyond matter, anything beyond actual physicality of either human or plant, then you lose it. Like the whole metaphysical realm does not exist, does not recognized by science. It's like, but that's where the magic is. That's where the healing is. That's where the mystery is. That's where the whole human history is. Something that completely out of the radar of science. So maybe we can talk about that too a little bit. That's a very interesting subject, But before, I want to ask you, have you ever experienced a mushroom voice like Terence McKenna was talking about? Like he was hearing the voice in the head?
Good question. A lot of people often reference McKenna in relation to mushrooms, and I think he shared a lot of important information, but I also think that he gave some limitations too. And there are many things to say about McKenna and his work in his life, but also maybe the fact that he was somewhat compromised and infiltrated with his connections to some of the secret services in the US. So I don't know how to feel about McKenna. I personally prefer the teachings of Carlos Castaneda in relation to the Mexican medicines in that kind of more traditional psychedelic sharing. But for sure, I've had many experiences with mushroom spirits, particularly the golden teachers. Very, very, every time I take those particular mushrooms, it feels very Egyptian actually, because there's a lot of very sort of royal blue lapis lazuli with gold. And right at the beginning of every journey, I get this very strong sense of this like blue and gold being coming to check in. Okay, brother, we're going to start the journey right now. and just checking in with you. And that's how I met the spirit of that mushroom. The mushroom spirit from the Liberty Caps in Britain, in Wales, or you would find in the Northern Hemisphere, that guy introduced himself to me as a druid. The first, I don't know how many times I took that medicine, and he would come to me, and I said to him, like, how come you look like a druid, man? And he said, look, where do you think those guys got all of their stuff from? They got it from me. I'm the druid. And it's like they were just copying me. So I kind of came to understand many things about our own indigenous shamanic cultures, like the ancient druids and the medicine men of old. And I don't know about the machine elves. I don't know about those things. The thing, as you will know from medicine work, is that it's very personal, and there can be many commonalities and similarities from one person's experience to the next. But the medicine will talk to each of us in a way that is appropriate for us. And for me, the mushrooms have always linked me into the interconnectedness of the web of life, or the web of weird. So I very rarely went off planet, actually, with the mushrooms. It was always much more about going into the earth, into the other world, meeting the nature spirits, meeting the beings, the elven beings of the other world, particularly in Wales and Ireland. They're very, very present with the mushroom energy, because the mushrooms kind of take us back into the earth, which is very much, the history of the earth too. And so, do I get voices? I mean, I tell you what I will share is that when I work with the Sacred Fungi and I work with Santa Maria, the Sacred Cannabis, it's kind of, I work with both at the same time, because the fungi gives me the 4D, the astral experience, but sometimes that can be a little difficult to control because the mushrooms can be a little wild. But with the introduction of the Santa Maria with both medicines, that gives me more of a control from a 5th dimensional perspective, which I started to realize some years ago enabled me to take control of my energetic space better, with more visibility, more control, more clarity in the astral planes on the mushroom journey. So I'm an alchemist, a quantum plant alchemist. And so I've learned to alchemize different plants in my body at the same time to manage my ability to be multidimensional in the medicine space. So do I hear voices? Yes. Are they like the ones McKenna hears? I would say perhaps not.
The machine elves is the least interesting and intriguing aspect of McKenna's discourse for me, although I like the guy. It was very inspiring 20 years ago. Like, it was very inspirational, and I think his contribution is important to the whole psychedelic renaissance, in a sense. But of course, you have to distill everybody. I mean, Carlos Castaneda wrote a lot of BS too, man. It's like, but there's a lot of wisdom in that too. So
right,
you have to have your own. You have to have your own understanding of things and filter everything through your own experience,
exactly,
and expand through this, So I wanted to go back to. Man, I think I forgot. It was just a point. You were saying something before before McKenna. I totally forgot. It was just I wanted to mention McKenna and then go for that, but now I forgot. Okay, well, what was that we were talking about?
We were talking about the scientific properties of the plants, and I can just say something on this while you gather your memory back.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's really interesting now that we are coming to a place where some of us are realizing that there's very little actual research into plants that isn't contained by big pharma, actually. And now that I'm working with somebody who is a chemist and who works with plants in a laboratory, we're discovering so many amazing things by testing plants like horsetail. We're working with horsetail at the moment because it has a very high silica content. And that silica content can actually alleviate many of the symptoms that we have been experiencing from some of the things from the last 2 years, or some of the medication that people have taken into themselves that's now messing up their immune systems. Plants like horsetail can actually help remove heavy metals, toxicity, toxic chemicals, all of those things. And we're at a place now where we're realizing that all of the research done into plants has all been patented and kept by big pharmaceutical companies. So they can make what are basically facsimile versions of plant medicine. And of course, I think this is, and you probably will agree with me, this is one of the things that I fundamentally think has to change big time as we move into the new era. And that is that we don't take a perfectly formed medicine out of nature into a laboratory, take it apart, and then put it back together with some bits missing, and then say that it's a better medicine than the one that we took from the ground in the first place.
Yeah, that's a painful subject for me, you know.
Me
It's like
too. Me too.
it's like when I hear about this, I get angry, you know. It's like it's just such a. I mean, it's just such a.
Why?
I mean, it's like everything. It's like a disrespect, misunderstanding, misleading. It's like find a name for this. It's like you take the spirit. You first of all you kill the spirit in the lab, and then you just have molecules of it. It's like a dead matter, and you're trying to administer that in a completely unnatural way to people and expect results. And then if there is no results, you can blame the plant. Oh, it didn't work. Well, I mean, it's not supposed to work. It's the same thing what they did with sacred coca. I mean, it's like sacred coca. It's amazing plant, amazing sacred plant. It's like that's how people survive in the mountains, working, walking, no food, no water, no fatigue, working their butts off all day in the places you can't even reach. I mean, you need a helicopter to get you there where to go every day to work. This is up, it's like coca has 14 alkaloids. One of them is just cocaine. One from 14 that all work in symbiosis. It's like it has amazing healing properties. It's good for your digestion from all the organs. It keeps you, I mean, it's a mood modulator. It's amazing plant. But what they did from it, they killed the spirit of coca. They turned it to a psychotic cocaine, which will fry your brain eventually, you know, and this is drive you, you know, nuts, you know, and create bad addictions and violence and all that stuff, you know, from sacred plant that cannot hurt you. Impossible. I'm the guy who tell you there was warranty. As much coca as I had in my life, people didn't have enough salad. I mean, I chewed more coca than people ate salad in their life. And I'm telling you that this is like impossible to hurt yourself, impossible to overdose. It's completely safe, beautiful mother plant, you know. But what happened to it, thanks to science, it was a German guy who came here 150 years ago, you know, and he identified the active alkaloid, which is cocaine, you know, extracted that, killed the plant, killed the culture, you know, put it in the lab, synthesize that, and it's like, and then it's just, you know, it's been already extracted through toxic way, and it's been now either injected or, you know, inhaled in a completely natural way. So of course you will have problem. It's like taking cigarette and trying to inject it into your vein. It's not supposed to be like that. You know, plants, that there is way to work with plants. And talking about education is very important. You know, it's a very passionate subject for me, you know. So plant education completely absent in the world. It's like in Western world, even not just Western, even just in the modern world, period. It's absent. People don't know the power of plant. There is no education about this. Their only kind of trusted source, it's a big pharma, which has nothing to do with plant kingdom. These are the murderers of plants, you know. Although 80% of drugs that they sell you is like based on plants that they discover in the Amazon somewhere, and they just kind of you know, made genetic changes so they can patent that and sell you under a different name. I mean, you know, when you start digging into it, it's like guys, you know, it's like, this is not the right way. This is not the way to healing. You know, it's a way to more sickness. That's what I'm saying. Go back to nature, back to plants. So sorry for my rant.
No, you know? Brother. If you hadn't said it, I was going to say, and I'm going to add something to it because it's also a very emotive topic for exactly the same reasons. And what I would like to suggest that when we look at many things in the Western world, like plant medicine, what we get is an inversion. An inversion of the medicine for healing then becomes addictive. And I will say this for McKenna, he wrote a good book. I think it was called Food of the Gods or something like that. And he goes into this very topic. And while some of the hypothesis, I think, doesn't hold up so well, I like the idea. And he basically says, when we took sugar and refined it, we made it addictive. When we took coca and we refined it, we made it addictive. When we took the poppy, we refined it and made it addictive. When we took tobacco, we refined it, added chemicals and made it addictive. The list goes on, and you know, actually, plant medicine in that form, in sugar, was what created the slave trade. And you know, when we talk about cocaine coming from certain countries, think about the number of hands that it's gone through who've got blood on their hands, people who've been murdered or killed, and you're ingesting that into your brain. Woo! You know, so
yeah.
I will say that
plus everything else.
Plus everything else, right?
The toxic stuff. I mean, it's just like
it goes on and on. You know, we have a word for what you described there. This taking of plants from the Amazon, biopiracy. Biopiracy.
That's a good one. Biopiracy.
You know, taking and again, taking the plants out of an indigenous environment, with quite often without the indigenous cultural permissions. Iboga, for example, is very
and then they just give you ibogaine, and they think it will do the same thing as you would have iboga ceremony in the bush, you know, buried underground. It's like it doesn't have the same power because it's just an alkaloid. It doesn't have the spirit, it doesn't have the ritual, doesn't have the whole culture behind this.
No,
you know, it's not the same.
Well, even that's just from the point of view of being holistic, like the Bwiti people who are the indigenous people of Gabon, the Pygmies who work with Iboga, the sacred root, they're like, you're crazy. Like the plant is already perfect. Why are you taking it apart and then calling it Ibogaine? Not only that, but it's being smuggled illegally out of Gabon because it's illegal to take the medicine out of Gabon, really, unless you're a Bwiti initiate. And so it's being smuggled with the elephant ivory trade into Cameroon. So it's like, wow. So then you've got this medicine that's being used for
it's already corrupted by spirit. It's already corrupted by everything. It's like it's corrupted spirit already, you know.
Right.
Illegality, smuggling, you know, bribery, maybe violence. I mean, it's like you don't what you get. I mean, you get demons with it, you know. That's what you get. It's like what I want to say about it's like talking about biopiracy. It's a very interesting term because isn't that the same what big pharma is doing to nature?
Exactly the same, brother.
It's the same. It's just legalized. It's just legalized because they have the power and the money to, you know, to make it happen. But it's the same thing. You take it from the mother nature, messing up with its genetic makeup, and then trying to make something better out of it. It's like just recently, I was one of our guests. He sent me an article. I mean, it's like something about Huachuma. I never heard this word. It's like a big pharma, some company trying to take Huachuma, trying to take mescaline, trying to mess with mescaline, and trying to inject something into it, or you know, kind of change its structure so it will not last so long, probably, and kind of giving that to people as a therapy or something. It's like, man. You don't do things like that. It will not work, first of all, because it just doesn't. Things don't work when you mess up with their genetics. The plants already passed through millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of actual experiments. Like this is, you know, they experimenting with something that was already passed all the tests for thousands of years. This is like documented history of Huachuma being used in Peru. We can trace it back 3,000 years at least, and that's very little. But that's where archaeology kind of they can look farther because they cannot carbon date anything beyond organic matter, and organic matter is what they found in Temple of Chavin. Temple of Chavin is the cradle of Huachuma civilization and kind of considered to be the root of Huachuma tradition, which goes back to 1200 BC.
Wow.
Okay, so archaeology says, yeah, there were people there doing this 3,200 BC. But when I go there, I feel like we're going back before pyramids, man. It's like we're going back to some prehistoric times, you know. But that's a different conversation. I just want to speak to this biopiracy and how ridiculous that is. Personally, to me, as a medicine man, it's just whatever you do, any plants, you know, it's like, you know, like peyote or ayahuasca. It's like extracting alkaloids and trying to administer that while hoping that will give you same result in the controlled environment. Is like completely contrary to the shamanic ways it was done forever in nature within the sort of shamanic context and rituals and everything that comes with it. It's like it's just not going to work. And meanwhile, they're just messing up with, you know, with nature. That's what it is, you know.
Right. Well, look, I mean, you can look at it another way, right? And I think this is also very much part of the AI cyborg reality that is trying to be created here at the moment. We've been given this very clear choice of this more fractal way of working with plants and nature like we do, Sergey. And then you've got this other way, which, and actually I have to share, I did have a voice from the mushrooms come recently. It was about a year and a half ago to talk to me about this. And they were very angry about this issue. And they said, we just want to alert you to this idea of synthetic mushrooms that are being produced in a laboratory for therapy, often by very famous people actually connected to the mushroom world, who I'm not going to name. But they said to me, you need to understand, brother, that we are not in that medicine. Whatever that medicine is, it's not mushroom medicine. Our spirit is not in there because we did not give permission. And they said to me, think about this. Whatever they are creating is at best a facsimile, at best a facsimile, if we can even call it that, a copy, right?
It's a copy for sure. You know, that's an interesting subject. Once I've heard, I don't remember, I think I read it a long time ago, so I'm not sure the details. I think it was, correct me if you know better about the story, I might be mistaken, but it was maybe Gordon Wasson or somebody else who brought synthetic psilocybin to Maria Sabina, gave it to her, she ate it, and she said it's the same. Did you hear about the story?
No, I didn't hear that story, but what I heard is that the mushroom spirit deserted Maria Sabina at the end of her life and refused to work with her. So I'm wondering whether something, the two stories is somehow there's a truth there between the two stories. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know, but it's like, to me, it was strange, you know, like, I don't know, you know, I respect her way for sure. She has her way with the mushrooms and healing people. So, but just to me as a medicine man, that just doesn't sound good. Because if you come to me and say, hey, here is the mescaline, love my mescaline, is it the same as your medicine? I will laugh at your face. Like, literally, that would be my reaction. It's like, just get out of here, I will tell you. Like, throw this stuff out of here. You want real medicine? Throw the stuff out of here, come here and drink the whole medicine, take the whole plant, you know, in the right way. So as a medicine, for me, it's a bit strange, this thing will happen. But I don't know the story, I don't know if it's true. I just want to share it to see if you know, if you heard about this. So
well, I'm going to look into that story because it's interesting. And, you know, living in Mexico, which is one of the only countries or cultures in the world that actually has a recognized shamanic mushroom culture. Even in Britain, it's like, you know, a friend of mine wrote a very great book called Shroom. And I highly recommend it. Can't remember. Andy Letcher wrote it. He spoke at Plant Consciousness. In fact, you can see that talk on the Wisdom Hub. Very, very interesting talk. And his book really goes into the mythology of the mushroom, and he rips most of it apart. And I said to him, I said, hey, bro, like, you've done a bit of a hatchet job here on the mushrooms. And he said, brother, I was in my heart looking for confirmation that our shamanic culture of druidry had mushrooms in it. He said, but I could not find it anywhere in the literature. But I said to him, that's really weird, because the mushroom has already explained to me that they shared their medicine with the druids. And he said, yeah, I had the same experience with the mushroom. But there's nothing in any of the culture, written culture, that says that mushrooms were part of British awareness until the 60s. Nobody's ever written about them. Yeah, the red and white Amanita muscaria, but the psilocybin, Samulcianta, the Liberty Cap mushroom, there's no written evidence at all of its use in our country before the 60s, really.
So what do you make out of it? I mean, were the record destroyed by the church?
I feel that what we have here is an interesting possibility with these magic medicines, is that they come and go out of our reality and our landscape according to what do the people need. So maybe for many thousands of years, they were in our landscape working with the Celtic people and the Druids. And then maybe they went out of our awareness and people forgot about them. But then maybe with the energy of the 60s, people suddenly remembered about the magic mushrooms. And so they started looking for them. And because they were looking for them, they found them. If you don't look for them, you won't find them, right? Same as history. We often find truth about history when we go to look for it. But was it there before? We don't know until we look for it.
You know, that's interesting. Right? That's interesting subject. And I think McKenna was speaking to it at somewhere about the knowledge reappearing and disappearing, and, you know, like due to climatic change or whatever. It's like in our time, it's most likely will be to political climate. I mean, you know, take communism, 70 years in Russia. We were living in hell for 70 years. the whole Siberian shamanism was destroyed by Stalin. It's like it's just like it takes like 50, 70, 100 years, and the whole tradition gone. I mean, few generations been brainwashed into a new thinking. Everything gone. The whole knowledge of ancestors gone, disappear. You can only get it through DNA, kind of through shamanic experience, or through some kind of experience that will bring you back to it through intuition. It's not going to be written in a book or somebody will tell you. So yes, knowledge can disappear. Plants are still there, but you just don't know them. You just walk through them. It's just a plant,
I think it's a very interesting topic, and maybe one that we can discuss in future shows. We've opened up a lot of doorways today, brother. I think.
Yeah. I want to talk about different things. I didn't want to kind of dive too deep in each of them, because then it becomes like a different conversation, But I think we touch upon different things, and it was a good conversation. Anything else you want to add, like kind of to summarize what you were talking about?
Well, look, I've really enjoyed today's conversation, brother. We've been chatting now a little bit with the Huachuma sessions, and we're both coming from the same space and similar journeys, but with slightly different plants. But we both work with Huachuma, and we've worked with Ayahuasca and many other medicines, and peyote, and in my case, many other plants like dandelion and artemisias and nettle, and many things. So what I would like to share is at the end is that plant medicine is beautiful. It's magic, and the plants always work with each of us at the level that we need. If we get poisoned by a plant, it's because we needed to be poisoned by a plant. I've taken many poisonous plants in my life, and I'm still here. I've even accidentally poisoned myself with some poisonous plants. And I had this experience with henbane a couple of years ago, where I was working with the plant at the physical level, and it's a poisonous plant, and I didn't wear gloves. And about an hour later, I started to have some very strange sensations. And I was like, oh my God, do I need to drink tobacco and purge or something, or go to the hospital? And the spirit of henbane was very present. He said, no, brother, I'm not going to kill you. But if I wanted to do that, you'd already be dead. I want to show you how do I work in your body. And so I was like, that's an interesting idea, and you can take poisonous plants, as many lamas might, for example, and never feel any effect from them. Why? Because that's not what's meant to happen for you. So I just want to make this point, because often people say, oh, I've seen even ayahuasqueros give like babies a small amount of ayahuasca, which to many people would seem like a crazy idea, or even give it to an animal. But the plant always gives the individual what they can handle and what they need. Right? I don't know if you would agree with that, but in my experience, I see that the plants always work at the individual level of what's suitable for me. Maybe you need to get poisoned by a scorpion on a peyote ceremony. That's your experience, right?
To stop being stupid,
Right, yeah. And, this is where a plant like dandelion, for me, he shows me every time, it's like, everything is perfect, brother. Sounds like Sergey's experience was pretty wild, and maybe he thought he was going to die, but it's exactly what he needed in that moment to open the door. I had a similar experience with ayahuasca and many other plants, and maybe for other people it's going to come differently. But when you're in a place of trust with Great Spirit, with the plants, not the synthetic versions, but the actual plants, I think that you are entering into a very, very sacred union, sacred partnership where co-creation is possible and healing is possible. But also, I just want to talk very quickly about what you said about the information being lost. The information is never lost. Maybe from one generation to the next, it gets forgotten, but it goes back into the ground. And when we take a medicine like the Huachuma or ayahuasca, or peyote or mushroom, the memories come back, and we remember, oh my gosh, I was a plant guy in another lifetime. And then the memory comes back from that lifetime through the medicine and reanimates you. So the information is never lost. Sometimes it goes underground for a while, like in Russia. Sometimes the culture is eliminated for a while. But the memory of the culture and the memory of the medicine, in my experience, always perseveres. So I just want to say that. Yeah,
it's frozen in time,
right? Somehow, maybe not even frozen. It's there. It's in a time space that can still be accessed and still has, I think, flexibility. But yeah, it's somewhere else in a time space that we have to access. Maybe
you have to access. That's what we're doing in medicine. That's what we're trying to do. To access healing energies and help ourselves and help others.
So I'd just like to share that for those people who found this conversation interesting, please check out my website, Quantum Plant Healing. I'm going to be working deeply with the Artemisias from the 13th to the 25th of September. So people who want to learn about how to work with these medicines, from Artemisias. I'd love to know, Sergey, do you know anyone around you who works with Artemisias in Peru? Because I'm sure they grow there.
No.
I have some friends who work with ayahuasca and Huachuma in other countries in South America who also bring in the Artemisia because it's a very powerful plant, you know. So sometimes we can work with some plants in combination. Maybe that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah. That's allied plants. It's a whole different discussion, you know. We can talk about that. Sure.
But thank you, brother, I really enjoyed today's conversation. You have anything else you want to say yourself before we wrap up?
No, really, just to thank you for your time. It was an interesting, dynamic conversation, and definitely we could talk more. But the time for today, I think, is good, you know. So maybe we do it another session, you know, Quantum Plant Healing Part 2 or something, you know.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So guys and girls, you know, if you want to meet David, he lives in Mexico, and you contact him and you talk to him, and he definitely can take you from there, you know, to visit some pyramids around, you know.
Thank you, brother.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
All right.